Greetings in the name of Jesus. This is your brother, Chireshem Sonda. This morning when I was in prayers, I was reading a passage about a good Samaritan. Now, there is this question Jesus was asked in Luke chapter 10, verse number 29 to 37. Luke chapter 10, verse number 29 to 37. Let me read this passage. But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor?" Then Jesus answered and said, "A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves." A certain man among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. The priest came and saw the wounded man and passed by. Likewise, a Levite, somebody who works in church, a believer. These are believers, Christians. Likewise, a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, that's your neighbor, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. Your neighbor is somebody who has compassion on you. Your neighbor is not necessarily somebody who lives next door to you, but somebody who shows compassion on you. Somebody who comes through when things are not okay in your life. That is your neighbor. That is your neighbor, brothers and sisters. So, and listen, and went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. Listen, my brothers and sisters, especially my friends from the nation of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has been going through a crisis for the last 15 to 20 years. Now listen to me. Who is your neighbor? And who has been your neighbor for all of this crisis you have been going through as a nation? Who has been, the West wounded you. The economy was wounded. A lot of things, sanctions, those were wounds that came upon the nation of Zimbabwe. But now, out of the so-called neighbors, who has bandaged your wounds? Who has taken care of you as a nation? Because as a nation, those are the criteria of a neighbor. Or those are the qualification of a neighbor. A neighbor is somebody who comes through during your crisis to do a helping hand. Now, when you look around the nations that surrounds Zimbabwe, among these nations, who is your neighbor? Who is your neighbor? Because tomorrow you are a neighbor to certain countries. Next, they will be neighbors to you. Now, who is your neighbor? What have they done? Have they shown compassion during your crisis? Have they been there for you? Listen to me, brothers and sisters. You shall know your neighbor during your crisis, not during your good times. Because when we are doing fine, a lot of people who surround us pretends to love us, to be caring for us. A lot of people that surround us, they don't mean well for us when we are doing fine. They don't love us. They are after what we are having at that particular time. My brothers, my sisters, when you are doing fine, you have fake friends. You have fake friends in thousands who pretend to love you. But during a crisis, that's when you can see your neighbor. So when this man was wounded, everything was stolen from them. His livelihood was taken away from him. The priest who was a pastor came, a Christian, believers, two believers, the Levites and the priests. These were, you can call them today Christians. Did they come through? No. A stranger came through. And Jesus asked, among these three, the priest, the Levite, and a Samaritan, who was the neighbor to that man? The lawyer answered, it was the one who showed mercy. My brother, my sister, when you show mercy to those in need, to those who have nothing, when you are having something, learn to share. Bless strangers. Take care of strangers. Speak well of strangers. Because when you do that, that means you are the neighbor. One way or the other, a crisis might befall you. You will be also a neighbor to somebody one day. So when things are moving well, be a neighbor to your brother. Be a neighbor to your sister. So who is your neighbor? Your neighbor is a stranger that's come through during your crisis. That is your neighbor. That is not somebody who lives next door to you, doesn't care. No, that's not your neighbor. That is a Levite. That's a priest. But somebody who come through during your crisis is your neighbor. So my question to you, Zimbabweans, who has been your neighbor? Or who is your neighbor during the crisis the nation has been going through? These are the questions, brothers and sisters, we need to be asking ourselves every day. May God bless you, and may God bless the nation of Zimbabwe. I shall continue standing in the gap for you, and I shall continue praying with you. May God bless you. Shalom, shalom.